Yeah.
And what are these, as in the case of chickens, what are they teaching me about them and what they need and how they communicate? And then what can I teach them so that there's some sort of bridge? And I think that, not assuming that that is already created when it comes to people. I think that that can be very helpful to remember too, because it is about building bridges to people. And that, and in that, you'll have a lot more people sort of following where you lead rather than, just expecting them to go where you go.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Sarah Dale. How are you doing, Sarah?
Well, Judith, how are you?
I'm doing good. And Sarah, tell me, is there any particular type of car that you like?
A particular car?
Yeah, car type.
There is. And it's I really want a Ford F-150.
You know what?
I have a little Ford Ranger that's very old, and I can't quite part with it, but I keep wanting it to get its big brother.
You know what? I love the way that you had that little smile in your voice when you was like, car? Yeah, I do. I just love the way you sounded when you said that. Sarah, tell me a little bit more about you.
Ah, gosh. Well, I where to start with that question? I am a mom of two, and I've been all kinds of things in this walk of life so far. I have had a long corporate career,
Mm.
in advertising, publishing, media. Most recently, I was the chief revenue officer of an ad tech company. Um, but I lived in Montana for about 7 years when I was younger. And I had an idea when I was out there around bringing city women at the time. Having been a city woman going to Montana, I had an idea around bringing city women out to Montana and teaching them all the things that I had been so lucky to learn out there. And that was like, it's probably been 20 something years now. And I am finally, following that dream and making it come to fruition.
Hmm. Excellent. Okay, so you must you must have learned a lot. What did your clients think when they were taken out of their comfort zone?
It's been really interesting, because what I thought that people would say is, oh my gosh, I got to do this, that, and the other thing of, whether it's archery or chopping wood with an axe or something, things like that. But it isn't what they are talking about afterwards or leaving me notes on. They're really saying, I can't believe I made 5 new friends. I can't believe I felt like I knew all those women for my whole life, or I felt like it was outside of time, or I felt so childlike, like all of these things that I just hadn't thought that's what it would all produce. But that's the feedback so far. So I think there really is something to this, getting out of our comfort zones and together, doing it with other people.
Oh, interesting. So, what kinds of lessons, leadership lessons, can be learned from archery?
So gosh, I love archery so much, and I particularly love any of these activities. I always love looking for what is the correspondence between life or leadership or teamwork or all of those things. And archery is a particular favorite of mine because one of the things that I learned early on was, although that you have to, there's the adage aim small, miss small, which is true. But when you first start, you miss a lot. And the first goal isn't to like, I got to get a bullseye. The first sort of accomplishment in archery is to get a tight group that is consistently wrong, right? So if you
Hmm.
get a small group of arrows that are consistently to the right or consistently to the left, you know what to do to correct. But until things are consistent, you really can't correct them. And in my time in leadership, I really found that that was so helpful. And I used to call on that a lot because what you're trying to do is find the consistent mistake, find what's consistently going wrong. Those are the things that are easiest to fix. The other things you can tweak here and there, but until you really understand, am I always to the right? Am I always to the left? So to speak, you really can't, they're not as easy to fix. So the low hanging fruit in any business, I feel like, is find what's consistently going wrong. And that'll be the easiest thing to fix.
Thanks for that. It's what's interesting, I suppose, is that with archery, there you need to take time. You can't rush, and
So
you have to line everything up, don't you? You have to line up your arms to the bow to the target, and you have to take effects of things like the the weather, what the wind is doing, where it's blowing, and how off course you are, and things like that. So it's not something that you can just rock up and release an arrow and get the perfect shot straight away. Not
yeah,
my experience anyway.
yeah, no, I agree. And it's also, you can do all those things. You can have the right stance and the right breath and the right posture, and all of those things can be just right. And the wind can change. So you do have to do all those things. And, you have to sort of get yourself set up for success, let's say. And then you need to be infinitely flexible when you're, and take into account the situation right before you that you're going to shoot that arrow. And I feel like that has some great analogous lessons in there for for leadership, because you can do all those right things. You can get everything just perfectly set up, and then something can change, and you have to be able to adapt.
Mm. Also, I'm thinking that unless you're highly experienced in archery, even if you were a good amateur, it's the second arrow which is likely to be the most truest one, not the first.
Sometimes, sometimes I can tell you one thing that I also love about watching other people learn is it's verification of this confidence loop, right? So from a scientific, I guess, perspective of in the research, one of the things that actually builds our confidence is this loop of confidence creates action. The action then, if it's successful, then builds another sort of molecule of confidence, let's say, and round and round it goes, right? And you can see it in archery. Once people get a good shot, their subsequent shots start to get better and better, because it's sort of the confidence part just sort of feeds on itself. And that's true for all of us in everything that we do, not just obviously archery, but when you get a win, I think it's why it's so important in teams to be able to celebrate the wins, right? Because then it kind of marks that that success, and then it feeds on the confidence of the team.
All right, okay, that makes sense. So, where are there other places, unsuspected places that you can get leadership lessons from?
Well, I think one of the other places, they're hidden all over the place, really. But I have a whole slew of chickens, and with Project 1490, my leadership community, when we do these events, we call them the Day of Badassery. One piece of it is I just let the chickens out. Um, and I let them run all over the place. And then as a group, I say, okay, there's whatever I've got at the time, 14, 15 chickens. You got to go herd them back into the coop as a group. And it's been very interesting to watch lots of, different methods of people wanting to pick them up, people not wanting to pick them up, people trying to, coax them with food and or yelling or getting sticks to sort of try to prod them along. And I have a call that I trained those chickens when they were really little to answer. And so really I can just say, here, chickie, chickie, and they'll all come running and go right back into their coop. And people feel like I cheated a little at the end. But at the same time, I say, look, like, to me, we spend all this time, whether it's in our lives or in our work, trying to like coax people to do something that we want them to do. And maybe we yell and maybe we prod and, all of those kinds of things. Or maybe we try to lure them with some food. But if you know something about the other, which, in this case, it's I knew something about the chickens they didn't know. You really, you can get them to come to you instead of having to, coax and prod. And so when you feel like you're coaxing and prodding and everything, if you take your attention off yourself and put it on the other and see what is going to motivate them, I think that that clicks for me with chickens. And, the other piece of, I'll say, anybody with chickens knows that it's the hardest part of having chickens is foxes or hawks or, all of the predators. Because when I first got them, somebody said to me, everything in the woods wants a chicken dinner. and, and it's true, and so we take a lot of precautions to keep our chickens safe. Our coop is like Fort Knox, but we do let them out because we want them to free range. Happy chickens make, nicer eggs. That's also a wonderful lesson for teens. Keep them happy. They'll do much better work. And then, but once in a while we will, have to, realize that the fox or hawk or something got one of them. And when first happened to me, I was really upset about it. And it took me a while to bounce back from it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can keep chickens. But a friend of mine said to me, you got to get a little farmer about it. And that helped me so much because, you do the best and you take responsibility for them and you take care of them. And then there's a time where it's right to let go. And I feel like whether that's with a team member or it's a project or whatever, you do your best. And then when the moment comes, you have to recognize when it's time to let go. And we can hold on for too long, and it takes a lot of our energy, away that we could be refocused on something else. So that's helped me a lot too.
Thank you. Let's listen to a quick advert. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. That made me think of childhood times, because we used to have rabbits, and there was this one of the does had a lot of kittens, and there's this really cute little black one, and it would never do what its mum told it to do. So when it used to get a bit dark, the mother rabbit would rally all of her babies, and they'd all go into the hut, and then she used to come and kind of knock on the patio door for us to lock them in, right? So she'd come, and the first time we was like, what's she doing at the door? And then we realised, oh, she wants them to be locked in. But this little one used to always sneak out, no matter how much you tried to make the thing smaller. It would always manage to squeeze itself out, and despite its mum. And then one day it got eaten by a fox, and it was hard. But then you realise that there's gonna be times when there's gonna be one that doesn't listen. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause like, 'cause when everyone used to sort of come out, his mum, before we'd lock him in, the mum would come along, she'd smack him on his head, like and like kind of nip him so he'd go back into the hut. But he was always squeezing out and going next door and never listening to his brothers and sisters, as it were. And I think and I suppose that's another thing for leadership in a way is that no matter how well you lead or how much you try to give lessons, there are going to be times when you're not going to be listened to, and there's going to be consequences to pay that you can't avoid.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too, right now we have we have an older flock, and then we have some new chickens that we are just, they're separate for a while until they're the same size, and then you can put them together. But
Mm.
so we have this other 5 chickens that are much younger, and I'm still training them. And it's also like if I don't do it now, when they get older, as these chickens, they will never listen to me. Like, you have to do it when they're young. So to me, it's like there's a time for everything, right? There's like timing matters, and what the results are way down the road matter what you do now.
Yeah, and I think the other leadership lesson I was thinking about when you was talking about the voice you have for your chickens, which is similar, I guess, to the voice people have for their cats when they want to call them in and how they respond to that voice, is that followers know the leader's voice and that's what they respond to, isn't it? And I think as leaders, we need to be sure that people understand our voice, understand us. And for us to be able to do that, we need to understand them and be aligned because no one's going to follow a bad leader.
Yeah.
Um, even if you get out the most nicest chicken food that there is, that chicken isn't still going to follow you if they think following you is going to take them to the fox's belly.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you recognize, well, at least with chickens, right? We don't speak the same language.
Mm.
So, and we assume that we speak the same language as other people, but we often don't speak the same language of all the different ways that we actually communicate and want to be communicated to.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot, I think, of observation and first, and then also teaching. So you're observing to see, what are these, as in the case of chickens, what are they teaching me about them and what they need and how they communicate? And then what can I teach them so that there's some sort of bridge? And I think that, not assuming that is already created when it comes to people. I think that can be very helpful to remember too, because it is about building bridges to people, and that and in that you'll have a lot more people sort of following where you lead rather than just expecting them to go where you go.
Yeah, and I think that's why as companies having clarity around what you value, what you stand for, helps people to know your voice and want to be with you. I remember back in the day as well, we had I think it was like this fox had come into the garden and all the rabbits were out. And it was really funny because the rabbits all ran, and rather than going inside their huts, they ran behind me, and then you could see them all kind of like being leery behind me. I was like thinking, it's almost like watching the Tom and Jerry cartoon. It's like, oh, you can't get her. We got, the woman's there. You're not going to come to get us, so we're just going to pull faces and muck about and do stupid things because you can't do nothing. So it's kind of funny. It made you sort of think, and I think that's the thing that we miss. I think small business owners understand that they need to stand out and stand for something. And I think sometimes when organizations get rather big, it's there's a forgetfulness that standing out part still is still required, especially internally, because you've got because the danger is you'll have an inconsistent culture because you'll have strong cultures in some departments and very weak cultures in others, but that weakens the whole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Got to have one culture. That's so important. It's interesting too about, knowing what you stand for, because I was thinking about the name of your podcast and the word maverick. I was given an award not too long ago with the same name, and I had to look up, like, what does it actually mean? Like, where does it come from? And I read the story that Maverick is named after this guy, Maverick, who went to Texas, I think in the maybe early 1800s. And he decided not to brand his cattle, and which was completely not the thing that everybody did down there, right? Because there were no fences or anything. You were gonna lose your cattle. And he did lose his cattle. And so Maverick became this term that denoted like people doing things their own way. And we think about it as a very positive kind of remark on someone. And I was thinking about it like, yeah, there are times where you have to know what you stand for, as you said, and regardless of the outcome. If you're overly invested in the outcome, it's very difficult to do your own thing and do it your own way, because there's just too many forces against you. But if you really stand for something, and not so invested in the outcome, I mean, nobody remembers the names of the guys that did the branding, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things there. So Samuel Maverick, I think the thing with him was by not branding his cattle, he was able to claim more than what was rightfully his, because it meant that any new animal that was born that had not been branded, because they hadn't got round to it, because obviously had the big cattle herd, was his, for example. So
I didn't hear that part of the
yeah,
story.
yeah. So it was like, it was a very interesting way of him increasing his stock, because if anything came along that wasn't branded, it was automatically belonged to Maverick.
Right. So it was like he had a brand without having a
The
brand.
brand, yeah. So he defined his own brand, and he also made other people work in a manner that fitted him, because everybody branded theirs cattle, so he couldn't have it. So he determined how it was going to work in that area. And certainly for me, when I was thinking about Maverick and what it means in my philosophy, being Maverick, I defined what Maverick meant, um, and I defined that to mean willfully independent person, and
Mm,
I distinguished between different types of Mavericks. So, and again, it's like you said in terms of being clear what you stand for. So, whilst I talk about Mavericks, for me, it has a specific definition in terms of when I'm using that term and the work that I do, so that it's not uh so Tom Cruise flying a plane and being Maverick
yeah,
is
yeah,
not my that is a type of Maverick, but it doesn't fit in the definition that I have for a Maverick.
yeah. That's
In
great.
fact, it's actually quite interesting because I talk about socialized Mavericks, talk about extreme Mavericks, and if you look at the Tom Cruise Top Gun and then Maverick, in my philosophy, he's moved from one Maverick to another. In the way that character has been developed between the two films. So
Mm,
I think what tends to happen is, like with most leadership stuff, there's not enough nuance. So people think, oh, okay, you're a whatever that thing is. So that means that you're going to act in this way, and I can then do this to you to make you do what I need because I've figured you out because you've done a psychometric test and it's given you this. Um, Whereas I look at maverick leadership as an adaptive style of leadership.
that's great. That
So,
that
so one
wow.
of the things, thank you. So one of the things you mentioned before was about confidence. So How do you help people become more confident, and do you stick in any particular gender?
Yeah. So with Project 1490, it's a corporate women's leadership group. And it's really for women and those who identify as female, anywhere from sort of, it's like 10 years plus in corporate, anywhere from manager to C-level women. And I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, to be honest with you, oh, I'm going to build this thing so it builds confidence in women. I just really reflected on the time that I had in Montana and how empowered I felt when I had learned sort of the things that I had learned out there, whether that was from, bow hunting to kayaking to snowboarding to like some pretty extreme horseback riding, to even chopping my own wood, things like that, that sort of make you feel very self-reliant. And the experiences I had out there, from whether it was grizzly bears and mountain lions and all that kind of stuff, helped me a lot with my own confidence when I got back to New York and, went back into a corporate career. And so I just wanted to get people to have more of that experience and also celebrate both what I call the grace and the grit of women, and not try to, whether it's like lean in and being more masculine. It's not about that. It's really about valuing what we bring to the table. And so we celebrate sort of what is also what I call the grace of us as well. And so a friend of mine actually said to me, "Oh, what you're doing with Project 1490 is really bottling confidence." And I was like, "Huh, is it? Is that what I'm doing?" And so I had to look at well, how do you build confidence? And I started looking at the science of it and all the research behind it. And it was so shocking because it was as if I had read all of that and known it and then built Project 1490. But I didn't. I was really just coming from my own experience. But the science behind it is really fascinating because what they're saying is we do come with a certain amount. We are sort of, there is a nature versus nurture kind of thing. But there's a lot of nurture and there's a lot of environmental and what we do that also contributes to how much confidence a person has. And first, when I was just Googling, like, the science of confidence, I wasn't Googling, is confidence holding women back in their careers? Or is there a difference between men's confidence or women's confidence? But that's what all the research is talking about. So very interesting that women tend to focus on competency and skill building, where men have more of a focus on confidence for whatever reason, right? And I'm not talking about, there's individuals and then there's generals, right? So this is generally speaking. And and so it matters when things like opportunities come our way. And there's sort of a well-known piece of research that started with HP that women don't go for jobs unless they qualify for 100% of the qualifications. They check the box. Men will go for something if they check 60% of the boxes. So they're making up that 40% with confidence. And therefore, they're putting themselves forward in a lot of different ways. That's specific to jobs, but could be opportunities, for new projects or all that sort of thing. We speak less when we're in a room outnumbered by men. Men don't have any difference whether they're outnumbered or whether men are in the room or women in the room. There's lots of little stats like that clearly are affecting how much we get paid, what jobs we get, all of that. And not to say that there aren't big changes on a macro level that need to happen in the world, but we don't have to wait for them, because the things that we can do to build confidence are really right in front of us, right? So if you get out of your comfort zone regularly, if you learn new things, especially those things that you didn't actually think you could do, and if you surround yourself with other confident women, and if you help other women, which is very interesting to me because it's kind of like a flex, right? If you are in the position to help somebody, then, it sort of gives you that another sort of molecule of confidence, so to speak. And so, that's with Project 1490, that ultimately that's what we're creating is a community of incredibly kick-ass women who come out and do things that they didn't think that they could do or didn't think they would do and learn how to do them. And then we get into great discussions and help for each other and support. And we drink a lot of wine and we have some wonderful dinners. And so it's like a whole experience that
Gotcha.
when you walk away the next day, they
Okay.
got more molecules of confidence going.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think what's interesting with those statistics is that they probably won't hold weight for too much longer, in the sense that Generation Z is growing up in a world where women are more educated. There's less chivalry and expectation that women are the weaker sex, and women tend to be the major breadwinners in a lot of families. So whilst there's a historical situation, but let's face it, baby boomers are retiring, Generation X, there's not many of them left. Then you've got the millennials who were who started to be raised on a more equal basis. I'm not sure whether those stats will hold up in the next 20 years or so. So there is certainly move, and even if you see some of the work, I forget which Nordic country it was, but they did this experiment where they had children of, I don't know, they look like they were primary school kids, maybe 12 or maybe like nine, somewhere between 9 and maybe 13. And they had them do some task, like they had to pick, there's blue and pink balls everywhere, and they had to put them into into separated containers, and it was boys and girls. And once um so a boy and a girl would work together, and they would work together to complete the task. And when they completed the task, they were paid in sweets, and the boys had more sweets, like significantly more sweets than the girls. And then they said, what do you think? And everybody was like, this isn't fair. Um, and the boys gave the girls, they equaled out their sweets so that everybody got the same. And it was interesting because the point of, I think it might have actually been an advert or something. And the point was, if children can understand it's unfair for men and women to be paid unequally for the same work, then why can't we as adults? And I think, these are the sort of messages that children are being raised with. So I don't think they'll
100%.
put up with it more. I'm not sure whether women will have confidence, those same type of confidence problems as they enter the workplace. I
Well,
think. I think.
I agree. I mean, I have some wonderful women that have worked for me, and a few that are involved in Project 1490 that I am always so struck by their boldness and their straightness. And I agree with you. I think that generationally, a lot of this, the gap that we see. I mean, some of this research was done at the end of last year, so it's still happening. Um, but I do think that generally generationally, we're going to see this gap start to shrink more and more as those women start to rise up in their careers. And also the other difference too is I've had some wonderful men work for me, um, who, they're growing up in a completely coming up in a completely different world and environment. And as they rise, I think that they're going to keep that kind of fairness that you're referring to of the with the children, they have that in them already. And they've also had a lot of women bosses now. And so I do think like, that piece is going to have its own effect. And I think too, there's no sort of end to building ourselves as individuals up. Is never going to hurt us. It's never going to, just like how far do we want to go and how fast can we get there? And if we can get there faster, we can go farther.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was lovely.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I'm Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.